Welcome to Thoughtful Planning, the place where real conversation, expert insight, and a touch of humor meet to turn our end-of-life uncertainties into self-assurance. I'm your co-host, Santiago, a history buff and a big kid at heart.
And I'm Honey, your guide through the intricate dance of planning with care and a whole lot of warmth. Every week, we're here to turn those intimidating "are we ready" moments into confident "everything is under control" moments. Today's journey is one you won't want to miss. Welcome to Thoughtful Planning. I'm Honey.
And I'm Santiago. As we start this next podcast, we're going to talk about elder law and a couple of other things. It reminds me of a joke that I heard once about a couple going to eat dinner. The guy orders a drink, like I often do because she likes to drive and let me drink sometimes. And the waitress asks for an ID. And the guy pulls it out, gives it to her, and he feels all happy. She went and came back, and he's like, "Thank you for making me feel so young by asking me for my ID." And she's like, No, I was just checking to see if you were eligible for our elder discount. And that's when Tony told me about this, I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah. It made me think of that joke. But as we always do, let's start with an essential question. So what is elder law, and why do I need to know about it?
Well, that's a great question, babe. And to be honest, I never even heard of elder law until earlier this year. So today we're honored to have Stacey Edwards from Edwards Estate and Elder Law in New Jersey as our guest. With over 20 years of legal experience, we're excited to dive into elder law and learn more from Stacey. But remember, while we're here to inform, this is not personal legal advice. For specific guidance, consulting with an estate attorney for your situation is best.
Stacey, welcome, and thank you for joining us. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you chose to go into the field of estate planning?
Sure. Thank you so much, Santiago and Honey, for inviting me. I'm very honored to be on your podcast, and I think what you are doing with your podcast is so valuable and necessary. So, yeah, I became a lawyer to help people, and I segued into the estate and elder law arena to give people peace of mind. It sounds cliche to want to be a lawyer to help people, but it's true. 29 years ago, I had hopes of prosecuting crimes against children. And then once I was pregnant in my last term in law school, my hormones changed and I cried at the drop of a hat when I was having to digest anything that had to do with harm against children. And so I had to change my thinking of what am I going to do with my law degree? And so I said, all right, how else can I help children? So I became a family law attorney as soon as I finished law school. And I did a lot of general practice as well, small general practice things. And I burned out after, maybe 2 years. I think I lasted in that arena because I cried every night over, the family law is not an easy topic and not an easy area of practice. And you really have to have a very thick skin. And I was raising small children and my heart wasn't into it. I wanted to be a lawyer and I wanted to help, but I was just too emotionally involved. So I took a full year off and played with my babies at home. And then I started picking up jobs for other attorneys. It's called per diem work. So for 3 years, I worked from home and juggled 6 attorneys. And one of the jobs that I did was a will contest, and I absolutely loved it. When I was in law school, Estates and Trust was my last class, and it was my favorite class. It really is about solving puzzles and playing mental chess. What if? You have to think about all different scenarios in your life when you're talking about estate planning, let alone elder law. And I really enjoyed the puzzle solving aspect as well as it's relational to humans. It really is helping people. So I found a job with an attorney who did estate planning and estate administration. And I started with him in 2005. And then my clients, I took a segue, left for a couple of years and tried out, maybe like 1.5 years, tried out some municipal government work. and wasn't happy with that. I didn't have a client to hold hands with. I was politically active at the time and I had a political science degree. So I went back to estate planning, and my clients who I had been doing plans for started calling and alerting me in crisis situations that mom was in the hospital and mom didn't have a power of attorney or a healthcare directive. And the social worker at the hospital was asking the adult child to select 3 rehab centers for mom to be released to do rehab upon her hospitalization conclusion. So that's kind of how I segued into elder law. Is clients my age or a little bit older, their parents became in need and their parents didn't have plans in place. So there is still to this day quite often visits to hospitals and rehabs and assisted livings to meet the client, to determine their capacity to sign plans and get them settled. So I do a lot of crisis management, getting folks out of the initial medical situation and into the long-term care recovery or long-term care treatment aspect of it. And if you don't have a plan, that becomes extremely expensive, and it really is crisis management. So, my mission is to spread the word about the importance of getting a plan in place. And it is not one size fits all at all. It's not, I have a size 9 sneaker and it's beige. My sneaker's not going to fit you if you're a man and you've got an 11 size wide foot and you prefer black. So estate planning is the same way. It really is fact specific. And it's really important because there's so many myths out there about estate planning and what it is and what it's not. So that's how I got into it.
Cool.
It's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Will you tell the audience what is elder law and how is it different from other areas of legal practice?
Okay. Elder law is not one book of law. We have 12 areas of law that affect the elderly. And when I'm speaking of elderly, we're really talking about folks anywhere from age 50 and up. It really just means adult. And if you look at AARP, for example, it used to be you had to be 55 and up to join AARP, which is an advocacy group for the elderly. Well, when I turned 50, I got a membership offer from AARP. They've lowered their ages. So there's no statute or regulations entitled elder law, like we have Title 3B in my state, which is estates and trust. We have whole books of laws, statutes that govern guardianship or conservatorship, a multitude of federal taxes, state taxes, marital laws, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, contracts, consumer fraud, disability and other public benefits, veterans benefits, ERISA, shall I go on? Business organizations and boatloads of case law in what's known as areas of first impression. All of that comprises elder law. So it's not just one arena. I liken it to is when I have somebody of a certain age, 50 or up, and again, it's fact specific. Are you still working? When do you plan on retiring? If you are 65 and older, I gear my consultations in 2 different avenues. First, we talk about who do you want to manage your assets in the event you become disabled, either temporarily or permanently, and where do you want your assets to go when you pass away? That's the estate planning aspect. And if you are older and we are looking at the potential for what if I need long-term care? What if I suffer from early onset dementia or Alzheimer's or a neurological infirmity such as Parkinson's or multiple sclerosis? Or I generally just fall and break a hip and then don't recover properly. That's the elder planning aspect of it. If that happens, we have to look down that crossroad and figure out a plan to pay for it, to finance it. And again, who is going to be the person to manage that plan for you or the people? You have to have more than one person in succession. So again, the goal is to make sure that you kind of put together what's known as an insurance policy to take care of what all the what ifs are. And so everybody needs it. If you're over the age of 18 And for the layperson, it means planning for what happens to your assets when you die and what happens to you if you don't die, if you have a car accident, even if it's just temporary and you're under anesthesia. Who do you want the doctors to speak to make the informed consent decisions for you in the event that there really is something in surgery that has to be dealt with and the doctors need a decision to be made? So again, it's not just one area of law. It's not just estate planning. It's crisis management and future planning for making sure that everything is in place so you have peace of mind. You can go to sleep at night with peace of mind that if there is a crisis, because every breath that we take is a gift, every step that we take underneath us every day is a gift, and we're not guaranteed to have the next breath, and we're not guaranteed to have the next step. So getting the documents in place and making sure your family knows, number one, where they are, and number two, how to use them, and making sure that they're actually with the doctor. The advanced healthcare directive is actually at your physician's office in the medical file, and understanding the difference between when you go to an outpatient center, for instance, for a colonoscopy, and the advanced healthcare directive they give you when you walk into that facility versus a blanket overall healthcare directive. When you go into a facility for an outpatient surgery, as an example, what you sign there is typically only good for the time that you're there. And when you walk out the door, you don't have a healthcare directive anymore. And a lot of people don't understand that. They also don't understand, especially the elderly, that if they go to the bank and they add their child as a power of attorney agent on a bank account, it only covers the assets at that bank. It doesn't cover assets at a different bank or cover the right to sign over deed, the title on a deed in the event the house has to be sold and mom no longer has capacity. So it's a big complex area of multiple laws that affect adults who are aging. So, and I'm in that realm. I'm 55 now. I'm aging.
Hey, being double nickels, not that bad. I'm just saying.
What's that, being double nickels? Yeah, I don't feel 55. I don't feel it.
I turned 55 recently. We're not like a young.
You just turned 55?
Yeah, 55 in February. So
happy birthday.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, somebody else just turned 50. I'm not going to say who.
Ooh, it would be that lovely honey sitting next to you. Happy 50th. Looking beautiful.
It's just amazing when we're thinking about elder and you used, over 50. I'm like, holy smokes.
Right.
That hit me a little hard, but.
Yeah. I actually have a joke with one of my clients who came to visit when I first had an open house, and he asked, what do you deem elderly as? And I said, well, honestly, 60 and up. And now I'm thinking more, I've changed my thinking because it applies to me. I need to look at long-term care insurance plans as well. And so we have this running joke, the client and I, that he says, you called me old. I'm only 61. I'm not old. I don't have wrinkles. So I said, I didn't call you old. I called you elderly. It really just means adult.
And it's really, I think that's what a lot of people have a problem with planning, is because they don't feel old yet. Mm-hmm. They don't feel like I'm not ready. Right. I'm not there yet. But we have a common thread in our videos and our stuff that we do. We say plan now while you're
clear of mind.
While you're clear of mind, because as a cancer survivor, I had stage 4 throat cancer. We didn't have anything ready.
God bless you.
And at the time, like Honey says, we were in the fight, and that's not the time to be planning. And I guess we need to.
Exactly. That's where you make the wrong decisions, when the crisis is high, the stress is high, the anxiety is high, the fear is high. So if I could demonstrate to you something you and I, before we got on the podcast, we talked about your toolkit, your legacy toolkit, and what you just referred to as, while you are clear-headed, that's when you need to make these decisions. So everybody over the age of 18 needs a plan. When my children woke up on their 18th birthdays successively, Mama said, guess what you're signing this week? You're signing a power of attorney instrument and a healthcare directive. And that is because when you turn 18, I don't know the law in every state, but it is state specific. So here goes my disclaimer. My disclaimer is I am an attorney, but everything that I say on this podcast infers no relationship whatsoever. There's no attorney-client privilege here. I'm not inferring the beginning of an attorney-client relationship. This is not legal advice. You have to check with your state-specific laws and be advised by an attorney in your own state. I am in New Jersey, so some of the things that I refer to are New Jersey specific. However, the overall concept of estate planning and elder law is a national topic. So that's my disclaimer. I'm not giving legal advice. I'm speaking in generalities. So in my state, if you're 18 or up, you are now an adult and your parent is no longer legally authorized to make any decisions for you, not to speak for you, not to contract for you by using a pen at all. So if you're 18 and you have a car accident and you have not signed a healthcare directive, then our doctors in our hospitals, of course, are bound by the Hippocratic Oath to treat in emergency situations. After that happens, we don't have what's known as a surrogacy law in my state. There are certain states that do have emergency medical surrogacy laws. It says that the next of kin is able to make emergency decisions for the injured person, but not in my state. So what occurs in my state, unfortunately now, is a loss of time, money, and an increase in heartache and headache because you have to go for what's known as a special medical guardianship. And that means getting a judge, going in front of a judge and asking the judge to determine the patient, who could be an 18-year-old, 19-year-old, 20-year-old, 45-year-old, 83-year-old, incapacitated. And then upon being determined incapacitated, selecting someone as the guardian. Guess what happens? You're a ward of the state. That sounds weird, right? Ward of the state. What does that mean? That means that you didn't sign a power of attorney and a healthcare directive when you had capacity to do so. And now you don't have capacity, whether it's temporarily or permanently. And the state gets involved and directs who is going to be the guardian. So that's where we get into conflict with families. It becomes very expensive. It's stressful. And the only people who win in those situations, guess who? The lawyers. We're the ones who wind up. And believe me, it's a crisis for us too. This is not easy work at all. And our hearts are in it, but it comes at a price. It comes at a very hefty price. So I always say, penny rich, tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars foolish if you don't put together a plan while you have capacity. So I wanted then to tell you about what I refer to as a toolbox. You have your legacy toolkit, which is a fabulous starting point for folks. And I really commend you on doing that for yourselves and sharing it with everybody else basically in the US. So you should be very, very proud of yourselves for doing that, sharing your journey. So I always tell everyone, pretend you're sitting in a living room and you're in your lazy boy chair and you look up in the corner and you see there, I can see sunlight. And this is completely hypothetical. I can see sunlight through the corner of the ceiling of my house. And the weather channel just told me that there's a great big storm coming. I better get out on the roof and fix the roof before the storm comes, or the water's not only going to come through the hole, but it's going to go into the sheetrock, the electrical, run down the walls, ruin the carpet. You're going to have a great big mess. So what do? The storm's on its way. I run to my garage and I grab my toolbox and I grab the ladder that's propped up against the wall in the garage. I run outside. I slap the ladder up against the side of the house. I grab my toolbox and I run up the ladder and I get on the roof. Okay. Put the toolbox down. I look at the hole and I say, what do I need? I'm not a roofer. So again, this is all hypothetical. I'm a total layperson when it comes to this. What do I need? Well, I'm going to need roofing shingles. I'm going to need a hammer and I'm going to need nails. And I look at my toolbox and I say, I've got nails. I don't have any roofing shingles. I don't have a hammer. I've got a screwdriver. I've got a level. I have a saw. I have a tape measure. I have a whole bunch of other tools, but I didn't check when I grabbed that toolbox. I didn't check to make sure that I also had a hammer and roofing shingles. So now I'm up here on the roof and vroom, big gust of wind comes. The ladder's gone. I'm on the roof. and I forgot my cell phone. So I can't call my next door neighbor to put the ladder back up and go into the garage, get me the tools that I need. And here comes the storm, big, black, ugly clouds, rumble, rumble, rumble. I'm stuck with the tools that I have in the toolbox. I'm going to have to lay down on this hole and take the storm. Injury is going to happen to me. Damage is going to happen to my home. Heartache, headache, time, and money. What was the ladder? What was that? What was the sitting in my living room, listening to the weather channel, predict the storm is coming? That's the prediction. That's the illness. The storm is coming. And I don't have a plan in place. And so in a panic, now that I'm stressed, I run and I grab my toolbox and I don't even look to see what's in it. And I go up on the roof. And when the ladder gets blown away, that's the crisis. That's the incapacity or the death. Once the incapacity or the death occurs, you can't change the tools in the toolbox. You're stuck with what you have in the toolbox. And that's where the conflict ensues. That's where the courts get involved. That's where the confusion and anxiety for the loved ones happen. So getting a plan in place while you have capacity, stop, think, look in the toolbox. Go get some advice from your next door neighbor who's a roofer before you go up on the roof. Don't forget to take your cell phone. Don't forget to take your advanced healthcare directive in your glove box in your car when you're out traveling. It helps you when you go to the doctor. Take it out, any doctor, take it out of your glove box and give it to the physician and say, or not the physician, the intake at the doctor's office, copy this for my medical file so that when there is a crisis, somebody has it on record. And if they don't have it on record, it's in your glove box and your other family members have it. So there's lots of ways of making sure that once you even do the documents, that they're useful, because they're no good if they can't be found. And they're no good if the people who are named in them can't be found. So phone numbers are very good to include as well. I know I kind of went off on a tangent, but I wanted to tie in your legacy toolkit with really, this is a toolkit. This is a toolbox that you are thoughtfully putting together. And there you go, thoughtful planning.
Yeah, that was a good analogy when you think about it, because you might not even be watching the Weather Channel and you see the first raindrops falling, and then you're like, kind of too late to even prep at that point, and even grab the toolbox to run up the ladder.
Can I ask you a question about that? When you say put that in the glove compartment box, right? The glove box, the healthcare directive, right? Or like, I know you said best case scenario, right? Put it with your physician. Okay.
Yes.
What if you do that and maybe you're in a different car when this happens? And obviously I would have to communicate that to my family, right? But do they, I'm assuming they would need to see this document because it's got signatures on it to prove those things.
Correct. So again, state specific, but in my state, it has to be witnessed by 2 witnesses. And you can go in your state, you can go Google Department of Health, Advanced Healthcare Directives. And I haven't surveyed all 50 states, but you can go on your own Department of Health or similar government entity that has guidelines that will have frequently asked questions about healthcare directives. And in my state, it says on there, it has to be witnessed by 2 witnesses or notarized. So if you don't have a notary available, it has to be signed by 2 witnesses who are with you while you're signing it, or you sign it in front of a notary. And some states have recommended templates, for lack of a better word, that you can just utilize their state form, or in my state, it's Scrivener's discretion, but it has all of the main points. The way that I practice, we make 4 originals. So the client actually signs 4 original advanced healthcare directives, which is the living will. And the second part is called the proxy directive, where you appoint your healthcare representative. And one of those I fold up, highlight it, paperclip it, put a sticky note on it that says, stick it in your glove box when you get to the car. One of them I keep and I mail it to the physician, the primary care physician. And I do have clients who say, I actually have 3 doctors I go to on a regular basis. Fine. We print out the scanned copy and I stamp it certified to be a true copy, and I mail it to those physicians as well. And then the client leaves with a third original that we direct them to keep it somewhere available in their home. We give them a plastic sleeve that if they are truly aged and they don't mind having their healthcare directive be seen on their refrigerator because they are under the care of a physician or they're having some other kinds of treatments and they're on medications, there's this plastic sleeve that you can leave on your refrigerator. And if you don't want it on your refrigerator, you can put it in your bathroom, your medicine cabinet on the inside of the mirror. Same thing, plastic sleeve right on the inside. That's referred to commonly as the vial of life. And EMTs are familiar with when they come in. Again, I'm not an EMT. I'm not in the medical arena. I'm making presumptions about how practices go. But when a 911 call is made, the EMT will come to the house. They'll check the victim and then go roaming through the house and asking if there's another person there, asking about prescriptions and medications. And they'll go roaming through the house and hopefully find this on the refrigerator or find it in the medicine cabinet. And then the last one, the fourth one, you can give it to your primary healthcare representative. And again, we always, in my practice, we recommend that you have 3 successive people. In my state, you cannot have more than one person acting for medical decisions at a time. It has to be person A, if unable, unwilling, or unavailable, person B, if unable or unavailable, person C. And we put in all the phone numbers. Phone numbers change. We get that. But at least it's a starting point with Google, right? And you can follow up. So that's the practicality of what I do in my practice to ensure that my clients always have access to it. Their family always has access to it. I also make sure that they know my emergency telephone number so that if somebody is in the hospital, and honestly, I've been doing this area of practice for 19 years approximately, and I've only gotten the call twice from the hospital asking for me to provide the healthcare directive. I've got it scanned in. And I say, sure, put me on the phone with the nurse's station, give me an email or give me a fax number, and I send it right over. We try to scattershot it, make sure that it's everywhere. And of course, if you make changes, you're allowed to make changes, you're allowed to revoke. In my practice, we give you record keeping so that you can keep track of who you've given it to. And I do have clients come back and update their documents, and I mail it to the same doctors and ask them to replace it with the new one. That's how it becomes very effective. Right now, I'm driving around with mine, my husband's, my son's, my daughter's, and 2 clients for whom I serve as a fiduciary, all in my glove box. So it serves the purposes of whenever there's an emergency that's occurring, whether I have a crash or I need to go to the physician or I'm going to meet a client at a physician or at the assisted living or something, I have them available.
Wow. That was very, very insightful. I learned a ton right there.
Yeah, I took a lot of notes here.
Yes. Thank you.
So stuff to add to our toolkit.
Right.
And, checking.
I'd love to collaborate with you. And so when we get further into this, I'd love to collaborate with you. Yeah.
And so I'm glad I asked the question, right? Because by you just explaining all that you do for your clients, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a lot, but that's what I do.
That is above and beyond, I think.
But I think it's so important. I teach, and I was talking to a younger teacher who asked me the question about our podcast. I don't sell it at school or anything like that. I don't push it. But he asked, hey, he stumbled upon it. And he's like, well, what are you guys doing? And I told him, he's like, well, I'm so young, I don't need to start this. And I'm like, dude, you do. Right now you might have this much in your cup, but what's going to happen to this much in your cup if something were to happen to you? And it's always easier to add more than start when you have a full cup. And, the light just went on in his head and he's like, I got to get on this. And I was like, oh, we're all busy. Mm-hmm. Just work on it as you can. So.
Yeah. And guess what?
And, even
we're all going to die.
True.
Yes. Yes.
We're all going to die.
Exactly.
We just don't know when. So let's get prepared.
We talked about this question a little bit earlier, but if you can just give, a treetop kind of answer to this, because I know every state's different, every person's different. But how can an elder law attorney help navigate the complexities of Medicare and Medicaid, especially when it comes to that long-term care?
Yeah. Well, take the example I just gave you. If you went to the general practitioner, and I have no offense whatsoever, I have absolute respect for all of my brethren. But if you go to a general practitioner, you've heard this before, cliche, jack of all trades, specialist of none. What I just described to you about how I handle making sure that the healthcare directive is accessible and known. If you don't specialize in an area, then you're not going to know all the nuances. So the practice of law is similar to the practice of medicine. You can go to a general practitioner who will give you a main diagnosis. And typically what happens, practitioner says, we ran some tests. I'm sending you to the neurologist. I'm sending you to the urologist. I'm sending you to the multitude of other practitioners to help narrow down the diagnosis and the issues with your body. So would you go to a podiatrist if you had a cardiac issue? Law is an area of specialty as well. Would you go to the personal injury attorney to do your estate plan? I don't think so. I would hope not. I stay within my lanes I shouldn't say most of. I run in the circle of estate and elder law attorneys who stay in our own lanes. And that is so that we can be the most valuable in our area of law to the general public, to provide the best competent skill and knowledge and problem solving abilities that we have. And when you go to law school, the world is your oyster, and there's so many areas of law. And I went through it myself. As I said, I started off wanting to be a prosecutor, and then I became a family law attorney. And then I dabbled in a whole bunch of different areas of law. And I really enjoyed estate planning, and it just kind of developed and evolved into estate and elder law. So that's why an estate and elder law attorney is more helpful than going to another type of an attorney. And if you go to another type of attorney, for instance, again, I mean, no offense to my brethren, but I'm sure you've all heard of what's known as seminar attorneys who pair with financial houses to put on seminars, and they say, avoid probate, do a revocable trust. A lot of folks wind up getting misled because they don't understand really what is a revocable trust. A revocable trust is a will substitute. People hear the word trust and they think, oh, it has to do with the wealthy, or it has to do with hiding assets. And there's a big myth out there that if you put your assets in a trust, they're safe from creditors and they're safe from spending down on long-term care costs. And that's just not true. An attorney who's not specialized in Medicaid knowledge, or not equipped with Medicaid knowledge, is not going to be able to guide the 73-year-old couple who's going to a seminar and putting together a revocable trust, and what they're really thinking they're doing is moving assets so that they'll be shielded in the event they have a long-term care crisis. That's not the case. That's called a revocable trust. If you want to do something that's asset protecting to save your assets for your family so you don't have to spend them down on your long-term care, then that's an irrevocable trust. And that really does require an attorney who has knowledge in that area. So that's how an elder law attorney is so much different than other practices of law. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So we used to have them in the newspapers. You get remember paper newspapers? That would show up on your front doorstep, and there were flyers in there for seminars. Now they pop up on social media platforms. And so again, I mean, no disrespect to my brethren, but you really have to understand what it is that you're engaging in. So you have to engage in some due diligence when you have questions. There's no such thing as a stupid question. And when you're engaging with an attorney and you have a question and they don't give you an answer, then that might not be the right attorney for you to have your plan put together. So do your due diligence and There are state bar associations in every state. There are county bar associations, and they all have sections called estate and elder law. Some of them have elder law sections. There's also the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys, which is a national group association that's accessible online. It's NIELA.org. And you can search for elder law attorney in your area. So there's a lot of material that's available for you resource-wise to find an appropriate attorney for your situation. But there's just no general knowledge out there, which is unfortunate. And that's my mission, is to spread the knowledge that we don't have, because we don't know what we don't know. And there's so many myths out there. There's so many myths about planning and how to do it right.
So that was a lot too.
Yeah.
The difference between revocable and irrevocable. And then on irrevocable trust, is that, so all the assets would go into there. And then if you, like, for an example, if elderly couple where they've lived a modest life, they have a home that's paid off, they have, everything is good, right? And then one of them gets dementia, has to go into assisted living, then, they have to pay for those bills, right? If they don't have insurance or things like that. And now what they built their whole life is now having to go and fund that care. Is this where then if they were to put their home into something like an irrevocable trust would help them in that situation, maybe?
Yes and no. First is, what's the goal? What is the client's goal? Is the goal to leave a legacy for heirs, children, grandchildren? Is the goal to provide the healthy spouse more than what the state minimum allows if one of the spouses is unhealthy and needs the care? So you always have to start with the goal, because if you're going to engage in irrevocable trust planning, it's very expensive. It's like the insurance policy that everybody hates to pay the premium for unless they actually have to make a claim on it. So irrevocable trust planning is complex. And yes, and I'm saying yes and no because, again, state specific. Some states allow for asset protection more in a larger scale than others. My state is a very complex state that makes it's very difficult to get on Medicaid, to have Medicaid pay for long-term care and shelter assets for that. So there's again, different rules for different states. Medicaid is based on federal law. And what do you need to be essentially to get Medicaid? You need to be broke. So Medicaid is what we used to refer to as welfare for medical cost. And in order to be broke, you have to engage in a thoughtful process of how to, within the confines of the federal law, which is allowed to set up irrevocable trust and transfer assets to the trust, but you have to take your hands off the wheel. So the second question is, all right, if your goal is to save assets leave a legacy for children or save assets larger than what is allowable for the minimum for the healthy spouse, are you ready to take your hands off the wheel? Taking your hands off the wheel means it's no longer an available resource to you. Available resources have to be spent for your medical needs. So Medicaid planning is very complex. Medicare will pay for your hospitalization and your doctors after your annual deductible. But if you wind up in a long-term care situation where you're in the hospital and then you get placed in rehab, Medicare will only pay the first 20 days in full. And then from day 21 to day 100, if you're lucky enough to continue to receive therapy from day 21 to day 100, there's a copay. It's a daily copay. So that's where folks engage in Medicare supplements, Medicare Advantage plans. That's a whole nother insurance arena that needs to be explored thoughtfully. When you have that copay after day 100, or if you're not able to get to day 100 and you really do need long-term care, what does that mean? That means you need assistance with activities of daily living. And assistance with activities of daily living generally are dressing, bathing, feeding, mobility, and transferring. If you need assistance with 3 out of 5 of those, then you're in the Medicaid clinical eligibility arena. But long-term care really means I need assistance with activities of daily living. And once Medicare stops paying for the therapy, now it's all out of pocket. And the daily cost for facilities, again, state specific. In my state, we run about $475 a day. And if you don't have a long-term care type of product, whether it's a straight long-term care insurance product or a hybrid life insurance policy that you can borrow against for your long-term care needs, or you don't have the wealth to pay for your long-term care needs, then yeah, you're going to be spending assets. The issue is, when is the timing appropriate to do that? Because we have this thing called a 5-year look back period where you can, if you want to, set up an irrevocable trust and move assets in there and take your hands off the wheel and trust that others, most likely your children, your adult children, to manage those assets. Then you have to do it before 5. Well, when you do it, the assets are still suspect and susceptible to being spent until 5 years goes by. So if we have somebody who's already in daycare, our window of opportunity might be halfway closed. And so there's a real analysis that has to be done on whose income is who's making what are all your assets together? Does the husband have assets? Does the wife have assets? Do they have assets together, jointly? It all goes in one pot because husbands and wives are required to pay for each other's medical needs. It doesn't matter if it's all in his name or in her name. They put it all together in one pot. When you're examining what the snapshot date for asset eligibility is, to get Medicaid, there's 3 eligibility areas: clinical eligibility, which we talked about with the activities of daily living; asset eligibility, which is a spend down to a certain level. And there's this thing called a community spouse resource allowance and a minimum maintenance monthly needs allowance, all kinds of technical requirements. And then also income eligibility. And a spouse's income, the healthy spouse's income, is always a healthy spouse's income. The income of the ill person will always have to go towards their care. And if it exceeds what's known as the Medicaid income threshold, you have to set up another trust called a qualified income trust to shelter that part of their income from being included for income eligibility. So there's so many hoops to jump through to get Medicaid. When you're in this thought process of, should I do irrevocable trust planning or not? Again, you've got to look at the underlying reasons for why you want to do it. Have the client explore, do I really want to create a legacy? And if the answer is yes, then okay, am I ready to take my hands off the wheel? And it's a family plan. It's not just the single individual who's engaging in this plan or the couple that's engaging in this plan. If they're doing this type of planning, it's because they want to provide for their family. So the family has to be involved as well.
Wow.
Okay.
That's a lot.
That was, yes.
It is a lot. Medicaid is a lot. It's a lot. There's no public service announcements about estate planning at all. And there's only 2 things on TV, and they're commercials. One is for pre-planning funerals and one is for reverse mortgages. They're both products, right?
Right.
So the pre-planning your funeral obviously is a fantastic idea. If you pay into what's known as a revocable funeral trust, it's transferable. You can take it if you move around the country. If you are going to be on Medicaid within the next 6 months, then you can prepay into a revocable trust before 6 months. And then within 6 months, you contact the funeral home and you have them convert the trust into an irrevocable funeral trust. You can assign life insurance policies to funeral homes to also pay for prepaid planning. But that's a product. And then the other product that you see commercials for is reverse mortgages. Reverse mortgages are an excellent program for someone to engage in if they truly want to be taken out of the house with their fingers in the rafters, right? There's a lot of folks who are, again, a myth about reverse mortgages is that they're cost prohibitive and the family doesn't get anything when the person dies. Again, what is the goal? What is that client's goal? Do you want to live in your home for as long as possible? And are there finances available that will help you live in your home for as long as possible? Can we use a reverse mortgage as part of the financial planning to pay for your long-term care? It's just one part of how to finance your long-term care. But again, those are products. There's no public service announcements about, hey, did you check your beneficiary designations on your life insurance? Because I seem to remember that when you started working as a nurse at the hospital, you weren't married yet, and you named your mom and dad as the beneficiaries on your group life insurance. Well, guess what? I had that case. Unfortunately, 43-year-old woman got married subsequent to starting her job, and she had 2 small children, a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. And she died from a brain aneurysm while she was on the clock at the hospital. They couldn't save her at the hospital.
Wow.
And her life insurance went to her parents. It did not go to her husband or her 2 children. So when your circumstances change, you have to review everything. There's no public service announcement about that. There's no public service announcement about your 401k. Who's the beneficiary on that? What happens if you get divorced? What happens to the 401k if you didn't update the beneficiary? I'm not going to give any legal advice. I know what happens. What about the IRA? What about the bank account that mom intended to add you as somebody who has, I don't have a pen right here, the power of your pen and the power of your voice on your bank account? But instead of adding you as what's known as a power of attorney agent, the banker had mom add you as a joint owner. So now when mom passes away, that $120,000 bank account by operation of law goes to the daughter instead of the 3 kids under the will. So there's no public service announcements about a will doesn't govern everything. A will does not govern contract assets like life insurance, 401ks, IRAs. A will does not govern operation of law assets that when somebody dies who has right of survivorship, it goes to that person. It doesn't funnel through the will. So that's my goal is I've made a living off of cleaning up messes. And yeah, I need to make a living. Clearly, I need to make a living. And I enjoy my work so much. It's so beneficial and it's so rewarding, but it's also really, really frustrating when I'm trying to undo the thought process that a financial advisor plugged into my elderly client's head when that person's not an attorney giving legal advice. So I want to get out there and spread public service announcements so that people can save themselves from heartache, headache, time, and money. So my law firm has only recently launched, December 1st, I launched this law firm. And I'm branding the firm Edwards Estate and Elder Law with the intention that we'll take the firm national and we'll, this is the bricks and mortar for a charity that we will build on top of the firm that will serve the elderly, disabled, and veterans with beginnings of public service announcements, with opening my medicine cabinet of resources. For instance, just telling your folks right here about NIELA and elder law committees in the state bar associations. There's no readily available information, and people have to come to an attorney and pay hourly fees. I command high fees to get information that should be readily available so that the crisis can be managed without stress and without, having to make instantaneous decisions that a lot of times are wrong or are made because somebody didn't have the right frame of mind. So I want to spread public service announcements. And eventually, the charity will be staffed by attorneys and paralegals so that planning can be made for powers of attorney, healthcare directives, and underlying wills, because wills do serve a beneficial purpose for many people. Revocable trust planning serves a beneficial purpose for other people. But for folks who are income qualified, that's what the charity will serve. It will prepare those documents for free. And then eventually, my ultimate goal, I'm going to live to 120 to make sure this happens, is build assisted livings, end of life care residences, and Alzheimer's villages on waterfronts, all paid for by the charity. So I use St. Jude's as my example because St. Jude's is, in my mind, it's perpetual. No one in their families pay anything for what St. Jude's does for children. That's what my charity, what my goal and what I will accomplish with the help of my husband and anybody else who's being put into my life right now. I'm building my network. Nobody will pay if you're income qualified. And if you're not income qualified, we want you to make a donation so that you can help the paraplegic who was born with cerebral palsy so he can live at home to the end of his days. Because if he didn't have an aide at home with him, he would have to go to a nursing home. Well, Medicaid doesn't pay 24/7 for the aide at home. So there has to be a way to supplement what Medicaid won't pay for. That's called community care. And if you can't qualify for a reverse mortgage, then you've got a problem. Reverse mortgages, you still have to have enough income to pay your property taxes and your homeowner's insurance. And if you don't get a reverse mortgage. It didn't used to be that way. Years ago, everybody qualified. It didn't have an income qualification test, but banks were left holding the bag upside down because folks were doing things with reverse mortgages that really weren't. It's not that they weren't doing things that were illegal, but the banks didn't have the forethought to realize that folks were going to borrow against the equity in their house and go buy a vacation house. And then the housing market tanked in 2008, right? It's a really complex minefield out there with no public service announcements. So my mission is to spread the education.
That's incredible. And actually, that's how, I heard you on another podcast. And when I heard you talk about that, I knew I had to have you on our podcast, and not only to share about elder law, but to share about your vision, right?
Your passion.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're right. There's no public service announcement about these things. And, I know when I talk to people, when we talk to people, it's a hard topic to talk about. And that's why, again, we're here with this podcast to try to get people to talk about this stuff, to hear it, to take a step. Doesn't have to be like, we know it can be overwhelming. We know this because we're going through this, right? And just hearing all the topics that you discussed today, that's a lot of information.
Yeah.
But it's okay.
Yeah. I have, oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say I have soapbox issues, and the power of attorney and healthcare directive are my big soapbox issue. And then another one is life insurance. And again, this is me spreading the word. If you have children, you need life insurance. And I say to folks, I don't care if you lose your job, you lose your house, you go completely bankrupt. Go out and peddle on the street to make your premium for your life insurance policy. Because I know too many tragic situations where the breadwinner for the family, the major breadwinner for the family, suddenly had a heart attack or had some kind of accident. They had no life insurance. And so the surviving spouse and the children, or just the children, are now left at the behest of Good Samaritans to pay for funerals, to pay for living expenses. It's really a tragedy. So even life insurance itself, even if it's just term life insurance, you got to do something. You got to engage in some kind of planning. You got to think about what you're putting at risk if you don't think about these topics and think about your death. It can happen. It happens. It happens. Yeah, we're all going to die. We're living, but we're all going to die. So take care of the folks that you love while you're here. Don't cause that. The whole goal of planning is to relieve other people from burden. That's my soapbox issues are the power of attorney, the healthcare directive. And if you buy life insurance, of course, people buy life insurance because they want to make a big legacy for their family, or they want to use it as a bridge to retirement, as a financial planning tool. But the underlying basis of life insurance is to ensure that your debts and obligations are paid in the event your life ends tragically, unexpectedly. Right? So do it.
Yes.
Awesome. Yeah.
Well, Stacey, before we end the podcast here, is there anything that you want to share? Anything else that you feel that you just want to get that one more thing in before we end today?
Yeah, just the general philosophy that no writing equals no rights. If you don't want somebody, you don't enjoy to have the power of your pen and the power of their voice, then you better put together a plan, because there's default statutes in every state, and you might wind up in a situation that you never anticipated, and it tears families apart. I see it every day. So do your due diligence, do some research, meet with an attorney who has a specialty in the area of law that you are seeking help for. Hopefully I'll change the landscape of estate planning in America by providing those services for free in the near future for the folks who qualify.
Yeah.
Yeah. That sounds like such a worthwhile cause that needs to be addressed. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, yeah, it should be as easy to get a healthcare directive and power of attorney as it is to renew your driver's license online. Granted, as I said, it's not one size fits all. They all have to be tailored to every single person, but it's essential.
Yes.
It's essential. There's no harm in doing it.
No.
Who gets harmed if you do a power of attorney and a healthcare directive? No one.
No one.
Who benefits? Everyone.
And that's, that's what we, one of the reasons we're on this journey is because we don't want to leave each other worried about something not happening. We want to make sure that we know this happened. We're good with this side of it. Let's just mourn, and then we'll take care of everything else because it's taken care of. Right. And we did it one way.
And just know, everything is amendable.
Yeah.
Unless you're doing an irrevocable trust or you make a gift, those are the only things you can't undo, right? Everything you can change. I have one gal, I'm meeting with her again in the next couple of weeks. She comes back once a year and updates her will. Nice. She's got a lot of dynamic relationships, She updates her will every single year, and she pays me every single year to do it.
Well, at least she's on top of it.
Right? Exactly. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So thank you, Stacey, for being our guest today. We've learned so much. I've got like 6 or 7 pages of notes here.
Oh, sorry.
No, don't be sorry. We may invite you back on to go over some other things that we still have questions about.
Sure.
So will you share with our audience the best way for them to get in contact with you if they need someone in New Jersey to talk to, or just general question?
Okay, thank you. So my website is edwardsestatelaw.com. That's EDWARDSESTATELAW.com. I am also on Facebook. Oh my goodness, I put the addresses there for the two of you, but now I don't remember myself what the links are. So let me have a peek here. My Facebook is Edwards Estate Elder Law, not to be confused with the website. The website is just edwardsestatelaw.com because that was what was available. Facebook is Edwards Estate Elder Law. LinkedIn is Edwards Estate Elder Law. And I also have my personal professional LinkedIn is Stacey Edwards Law. And I'm more than happy to provide, like I said, my medicine cabinet of resources. I'll give anybody 5-10 minutes of my time. Again, this is not to invite legal advice from anyone, but we very often in this arena, we help other attorneys get referrals in other states. Like I have a relative who's in California and they need planning. Hey, Stacey, do you know somebody in California? And so I typically will hop on NAELA, NAELA.org, National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys, to give that referral if I don't have a direct connection out there, which I do, by the way. My former partner's out in California in the LA area.
Okay.
But
it helps out to know people and building that network.
Yep.
So to circle back to our essential question, and hopefully you have a broader understanding of the essential question now when you look back to answer it for a second time. What is elder law and why do I need to know about it? I went in with a very limited view and I still don't think I know probably 10% of what I should know.
Yeah. So. Well, I've been learning it for 18 years. It's a learning process every day.
Yeah.
And some days I say, oh gosh, I don't know why people even pay me money. I don't know what I'm doing. But really it's because I'm trying to be diligent and make sure that I do it right.
Yeah.
I got gray here because I worry over, did I do it right?
Cool.
So I want to do it right. I want to give people peace of mind. I want to be the key to your peace of mind.
Awesome.
So that's what planning is. Planning is the key to your peace of mind.
I like that.
A good plan. There's lots of bad plans. Don't do a POA where you only name one person. Don't do a healthcare directive where you only name one person. You need to think, what if in chess? What if that person is not available for you due to death, incapacity, divorce, what have you? You got to go down the line. At least 3 people. And you can change it at any time.
Awesome. Oh. Thank you again.
So there's my final thoughts.
Thank you again, Stacey, for joining us.
You're welcome.
All right, everyone. Until next time, remember, every chapter you write today shapes your legacy tomorrow. Thank you for joining us at Thoughtful Planning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And just like the vibrant hues of a setting sun, we're wrapping up another episode of Thoughtful Planning. Every shared story and insight is a step closer to turning uncertainty into celebrations of preparedness.
Absolutely. And to our listeners, remember that every surprise that comes our way is an opportunity to grow, adapt, and learn. Stay tuned for more stories, expert insight, and of course, a touch of wit in our next episode.
We're not just co-hosts, we're fellow travelers on this journey. For more information on additional resources, which will help you take the next step in planning, look for the link in the show notes for our membership. Join us next time for another episode of Thoughtful Planning. Until then, keep living, laughing, and loving every moment.